Happy Halloween, viewer! You know, if you're watching this the day it comes out, otherwise, happy regular weekday. To finish the month off, I wanted to look at a horror title that was the spawn of something that seemed to take gaming communities by storm for about 20 minutes when it came out. See, back in 2012, someone made a video game about trying to find your homework in the woods whilst running from Slender Man. Slender the 8 pages, you might have heard of it. The whole game takes place in the dark, you have a shitty flashlight and no means of defending yourself. All you could do was find 8 random pages and then the game was over. I think the game was over anyway, I only ever managed to get 7 before Slender Man got me or I got bored of looking. Back then I was less susceptible to the one horror thing that the game really had going for it, those being jump scares, so I didn't exactly enjoy myself. Then, in 2013, as a result of the surprising popularity of this rather basic little title, we got Slender, The Arrival, which follows the events of the first game, apparently. Not sure how, the first game didn't really have a plot, but that's something that Slender, The Arrival has. It has a plot. Again, at least I think the first game didn't have a plot. It's been a long time since I've touched that game. You play as Lauren in Slender, The Arrival, not the 8 pages. I have no fucking idea who you play as in Slender, The 8 pages. I choose to believe it's someone who looks like Mr. Bean because it makes me laugh. Anyway, on to Lauren. Her sister has gone missing, so Lauren comes to her house, looking for her, and then, being one of stellar intellect, decides to wander around aimlessly in the dark all night. You know, rather than call the police or wait for sunup. She's armed only with a flashlight, a camera, and a weird medical condition that makes her sight bob when she runs, because apparently that's how heads work. It's not. I've run before and my sight doesn't do that, because the brain fixes it. Anyway, you've got to solve the mystery of her sister's disappearance, all whilst running from the Slender Man himself. I played this, I want to say, back in 2016 for the first time. I can't quite recall, but I managed to get all the way through the game and concluded that it was kinda shit. Later, I'd remember the game existed and me and a friend took turns playing through it about, I think it's 2017 that was in? And we concluded it was still shit and wasn't even fun to make fun of. It was just a lousy game, just boring. Now, having played through it a bit more, I conclude that it's still pretty lousy, and I don't see why everyone was so into this whole Slender Man thing. Of all the shitty internet horror characters, he's one of the shittiest. He's just some dude in a nice looking suit. Although the fact that he's in a suit makes me laugh. I like to picture that somewhere there's this one dude who runs a laundry shop who's seen some really weird shit. Remember how I mentioned the whole head bobbing thing earlier? Well, the game is a poster child for horror game cliches, and that's one of them. Where games try to fuck with your head by giving you a headache when your character moves. In Slender the Arrival, you're almost always in the dark or otherwise have restricted visibility. You have a shitty flashlight that does not behave like a flashlight behaves, only having a tiny circle of light that sort of works. When encountering monsters, the one thing you can do is run away from them. There's random pieces of paper everywhere, and the game exclusively relies on jump scares to do horror. You see, while the game has many typical horror game tropes, as I just listed a second ago, the funny thing about all of these little horror tropes is that on their own, none of them are horror. None of them create horror, and they can all just as easily add to the frustration and unfun design of a game rather than improve your experience. Obviously, horror is a very subjective thing, but to me, running around in the dark looking for a diary isn't scary. It can add to the scary by all means, but it doesn't make a game scary on its own. In Slender's case, I just found it irritating because I had to rely on a shitty flashlight that has a tiny circle of light because all shitty horror titles buy their flashlights from the same budget store. In the second area of the game, it's basically Slender the 8 pages all over again. You're looking for bits of paper that are scattered around the woods and they just have children's doodles on them. All the other things you can collect are just random snippets of newspapers and flyers that are used to tell something of a backstory. Obviously, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but in this case, if you can comb through them all, you're a more dedicated person than I am, and you know that I'm usually into that shit. I even mentioned in Sober how I liked reading terminals and documents to learn stories. For some reason, I just wasn't taken in this time around. Another of the typical horror game tropes is the isolation. But again, isolation on its own isn't horror. It can be used to build tension and atmosphere, but it's not enough as far as I'm concerned. That's not to say the game does absolutely nothing right. The idea of catching glimpses of Slender Man and having to look away and run is actually okay. I don't mind it in this game's case because we're supposed to run away, not hide. It's not like Amnesia or Sober where the monsters are bad to look at, but you also kind of need to look at them to figure out where the fuck to hide and when it's safe to wander. So at least this time around it wasn't quite as annoying. I will praise that one design choice, though praise is a funny word to use here. And a couple of the times Slendy Man appeared, well, it was a successful jump scare, I'll give it that. I think like a couple of times, quite literally 2 times, he appeared randomly and it made me jump, so well done there. After the third time though, I'd sort of gotten used to it happening. And since he doesn't do any movement on his own, he just appears at random places, he's only dangerous if you, run into him on your own. If you get within a foot of the dude, you're basically dead, but because you're given plenty of warning because your camera starts glitching as soon as you look at him, you've got plenty of time to just run in the opposite direction. So that whole forest section is just running back and forth through the dark trying to find a bit of paper. I should mention that this isn't the whole game. There's a stage that takes place entirely in a mine, where you're being chased by a pig-faced loon. There's a bit at the end of the game where you're in a burning forest, so you can sort of see where you're going, although the fire kind of hampers visibility anyway, so it's just replacing the darkness with the fire. We play as a kid on I think he's at a lake shore at one point. I can't quite remember. I didn't get that far this time. I only really got through the forest before I got bored of this game. But I do remember that happening, so I'm putting it down anyway. There's even a bit where we put a videotape into a cassette player. Cassette player? I don't think you call them cassette players. I don't fucking know. You put a tape into a TV basically, and you take control of the person on the tape. I'm not having a lot of luck with this one. I'm just going to leave that in there, though. You control a person on the tape and you basically play through their adventure, which was alright. I mean, it was nice that it was varied. I don't consider any of these levels to be actually worth playing, but I like that the game put in the effort to try and have some variation in its stages, so you're not just wandering around the forest all the time. But they're all basically the same, save for the one where you're the kid just following a train of toys. In all these stages, you're in a place that hampers visibility and you're running away from Slender Man or Pigface, sometimes both if I recall. I could be recalling that wrong. I hinted at this a moment ago, but I only played again to get the footage I wanted, and I couldn't be bothered to go more than 20 minutes into this game. So all of this footage is just going to be, you know, the woods. You'll just see me wandering aimlessly around the woods. Probably uncut, depending on how much effort I choose to put into this. Aside from one or two jump scares, the game is really not worth anything. It tries to spice things up by moving certain items around when you start new playthroughs, like the flashlight might be in a different room and a key might be in a different place, or certain parts of the map might alternate, which is, I think it's designed to, you know, give the game a sense of replayability, but I don't find that fun, I just find it annoying. It means you can't get to grips with where anything is. It's all the fun and excitement of forgetting where you left your house keys. Anyway, that's Slender the Arrival, a shit horror game. Honestly, I've said what I want to say now. This game doesn't really have anything else to bring up. Shit, the review's a bit short. You know what, as a treat, here are all the drawings I've done this month. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, be sure to check out the other content available on the channel, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more content. You can also support the channel on Patreon from as little as £1 a month. Check out the link in the description. Thanks in advance, and we'll see you next time.